San Diego trolley system has steadily increased starting from 2002 to 2006, where it peaked its ridership number to about 36.4 million trips. But since 2006, ridership numbers have steadily decreased, with, according to most recent data, brings us down to 31.2 million trips in 2012. According to a 2007 to 2011 survey conducted by the United States Census Bureau, San Diego had about 631,000 workers over the age of 16. And out of these workers, only 4.1% of them take public transit, while 75% of them drove alone to work. Now, I'd like to know how these numbers make you guys feel. Brittany?
Well, I'm not surprised that very little people take public transit. It can get pretty expensive. And if I want to take a trolley to different parts of San Diego, I need to pay $2.50 for every time I want to go somewhere through the trolley. Or if I want to take the bus, it would be $2.25 each trip.
Yeah, but think about it. I mean, how much would you be spending if you drive solo to work? One week's worth of commuting via public transit would only cost about $15 on average, whereas a tank of gas would cost anywhere between $30 to $50, depending on the kind of car you drive, especially with the ever-rising prices of gas these past few years and months. But gas isn't the only factor you have to consider. There's also car maintenance and other extraneous costs like paying for parking in congested areas such as downtown, PB, Hillcrest, or even here.
Well, I guess it might be more expensive in the long run to commute using my own vehicle instead of taking public transit. But I guess what I'm mostly paying for is my own time. Commuting using the trolley or the bus can take up a lot of time due to multiple stops before reaching my destination, delays, or unreliable stop times. As a busy college student taking 16 units, working 20 hours a week, and doing research for my Psych 199, ain't nobody got time for that.
That's true, Brittany. Nobody really has time for that. In fact, according to researchers at UC Berkeley, they found that people are more likely to reduce their transit use if there are delays at transit stops. At this point, no one's really thinking about how much money they're saving, but rather, our short-term desire to be at our destination as soon as possible prevails. Our short-term desires are what cause our compulsive behaviors to choose solo driving rather than public transit. It would require much effort in order to overcome our compulsive behaviors.
Another negative factor of taking public transit would be that there aren't enough stops for the trolley system. A lot of the stops are concentrated in only certain areas of the county as opposed to all over the county.
Actually, the city of San Diego has some expansion plans for a rapid transit system that should begin construction in less than a year. The Mid-Coast Corridor Transit Project will extend the trolley's Blue Line service from downtown to University City area. That's right down the street from Genesee, and including stops at Westfield UTC and even here at UCSD. The University City area has developed into a major employment hub and has also grown in the number of residents. So the implementation of public transit in these areas will serve the growing demand. The expansion of the trolley into University City should also lessen traffic on the I-5, considering that the increased ridership would correlate with the decreased number of solo commuters or commuters in general.
Well, even if they do add more stops, I don't think a couple of cars will make that big of a difference on the county as a whole. I mean, it would be difficult and maybe even naive to think that everyone will stop driving themselves and rely on public transportation. That would be a major commitment and lifestyle change that I don't think the entire county is up for.
Well, you wouldn't want the situation to turn into a tragedy of the commons, would you? I mean, if we as a county continue to neglect public transportation in order to fulfill our short-term desires, our environment will suffer some major consequences. As it is, the Global Footprint Network claims that the Earth's aggregate ecological footprint, that is the rate of human demand on the planet's resources, is 1.5 planet Earth. That means that we use much more of the planet's resources than the planet has a chance to regenerate. According to CBS News, San Diego is one of the several cities where particulate pollution has increased within the past year. Now, San Diego isn't as bad as other cities like Smell A, but we could probably prevent such an increase. If more people stopped driving their cars and started taking public transportation as a means to commute, I think we'd be doing each other and our environment a big favor. If we don't drastically reduce consumption of resources and vehicle emissions, the global footprint estimates that we could be using 2 times the Earth's resources by 2030.
Well, I don't think it's effectively possible to convince those 75.3% of the 631,000 San Diegan workers to suddenly switch to public transit. How do you expect us to suddenly become these other highly urbanized cities with great public transit like New York or San Francisco? I mean, according to the US Census Bureau survey from 2007-2011, 55.4% of New York's working population commute via public transit. There's no way we can get to their level so soon.
You're right, Brittany. To expect the entire county to change their commuting habits so suddenly would definitely be ineffective because of how large scale the county is. The larger the group, the easier it is for everyone to rationalize their decision to take their car rather than to take the bus. No one is accountable for their actions. Most often, behavioral solutions are most effective in smaller groups.
I'd say we should start small. Instead of looking down on ourselves for rapid transit systems lack of opportunity, we can look at New York or San Francisco and learn from them. Or better yet, why don't we look at ourselves? Maybe we should focus on a smaller population than San Diego as a whole. Let's start with the University City area or even just the area around UCSD. Since jobs and residents are becoming highly concentrated in this area, maybe changes here could influence the rest of the county.
Modifying thoughts and behaviors of commuting and transportation sounds like a great start. However, this must be done effectively. Some people, taking their own car can be seen as a continuous reinforcement because, assuming they drive a reliable car, driving will get them from point A to point B. The public transit system is not as reliable. Buses and trolleys can deviate from their schedules and they can be delayed. Because of this, public transportation can become less rewarding than driving your own car. And if this is the case, then the behavior of taking public transit will become the same.
Yeah, like how do you expect me not to take my car when it's continuously rewarding compared to taking public transit? Not only that, but functional fixedness affects the way San Diegans think about transportation. San Diego is a freeway-first city. It's not easy to walk or even bike to places we need to get to. Plus, oftentimes you need to walk, bike, or even drive some distances to get to public transit stations. They're not always conveniently near, and we can't assume that behavior is flexible, and we're so used to driving to get us places in the first place.
I'll concede that our behavior can be inflexible, but that's only due to a lack of constraints to promote the target behavior. However, it's still possible to read that behavior into one that's preferable by using reinforcements to support the target behavior. In order to change our impulsive behaviors, we need self-control. And achieving self-control requires techniques that can modify the way we think about public transit. These techniques include self-reinforcement, commitment, stimulus control, and record keeping.
Right. Well, an idea for self-reinforcement could be to treat yourself to something special, such as a nice meal or using the money you ultimately save on gas, car payments, insurance, etc. For commitment, you could deliberately not fill your gas tank to full, but give yourself just enough for emergencies. That way you can put yourself in a situation where you are not tempted to take your car out and just opt to take public transit instead of wasting time and finding a gas station to fill up your tank. For stimulus control, how about just using your car only for certain occasions, like on weekends? And lastly, for record keeping, you could keep a record of your driving expenses for a week and compare that to a week of taking public transit. Seeing the economic difference on paper will hopefully convince you that taking public transportation over driving solo is a good idea.
So that's a pretty good idea as well.
Well, yeah, I guess I could try that.
So I encourage everyone to try it. If we're ever going to achieve change, I think it's going to start with us.
Thank you for both of your input, and that concludes our discussion on rapid transit in San Diego.
Question?
I think it was a great talk, by the way, but that's not what I'm speaking of. So forth for nothing but terrific talk. Despite the fact I think it's a great talk, it seemed to me you either didn't mention or hardly mentioned two factors. In terms of the advantages of not carpooling, we'll get to that. Well, now that I said it, carpooling is one of them. And that is, you didn't mention carpooling. I mean, it's not all or nothing in terms of taking your car or not. In other words, it may be difficult to arrange, but carpooling gets around some of the objections and expense and so on. And the other point I wanted to make is that you said once or twice that it takes longer to use public transportation than to drive your car. That may be, but if you're driving your car, especially if you're the driver, you can't do anything else. Where when you're taking a bus or the coaster or whatever, any kind of public transportation, and I know this from personal experience because I've gotten in my lifetime tremendous amounts of work done riding public transportation or private transportation in any event. So I think those factors might help bolster an argument for conservation.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Also, that would be speechless.
It would have been interesting, like a lot of newer apps now predict the time it's gonna come, so while the schedules say like, one of your arguments were that times get delayed and you don't know, well, the apps now can tell you that, right, the times you can plan your day accordingly, like, oh, I noticed it's running 2 minutes, like, continuously all day, you know what I mean, so that way you kind of get around that issue.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned, actually, one of the papers we cited, the paper she cited by researchers at UC Berkeley mentioned that people who have access to like a smartphone app that tells them around what time the bus is going to get there, they actually use the bus less.
Really?
Because of the fact that you can see that it's going to be delayed. Like, oh well, what's the point? You know, so they're choice riders, so they have choice. They choose public transportation as opposed to driving their car because they know of all of the advantages you just mentioned, that you can get work done and it's not your gas if you're using. But if it's not reliable, then they will opt for the other option. It's so like there are other options like a safety net. You know what I mean?
Well, in New York City, they have like a couple, it's either million or billion.
That's a big
All the subway stations, they're starting to put the time the next train will arrive.
Yeah.
So that's the New York where it is.
Yeah, they do that before.
So, but that's not much with the two cities that use public transport.
All right.
Thank you for bringing up that last study. It's to me counterintuitive, but now I understand how it could be. Very.
Is there, outside of like extending lines, is there anything that you guys found the city is doing to like incentivize public transportation?
Aside from the stuff that I see, taking buses, and of course that's just one person's perspective. I guess when I used to live in LA, there's billboards for how much money you can save and what time you can save and the stress you can save from not just being stuck in traffic and realizing you're gonna be late to your appointment. You know.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that, I guess, with the just stimuli. You know, telling you.
Anything I can think of is I saw a sign the other day on this Friday, it's supposed to be like bike to it day, so I guess that's the thing. Not necessarily public transportation, but not driving public traffic.
And I think some businesses are actually offering to pay for like your passes. And like I know, like my boyfriend, he gets his trolley pass vouched by the school because he works downtown, and it like applies for class credit